They say freedom comes at 18. But when Henry Morrison slid that cardboard box across his metal desk, all I felt was the fluorescent hum of another ending. "This is everything, Iris," he said. His voice had that social worker smoothness, warm enough to sound kind, distant enough to stay professional. "Everything from your grandfather's estate." 10 years. A decade compressed into a shoebox sealed with yellowing tape. I didn't open it on the bus. Didn't open it that first night in the transitional housing unit that smelled like industrial bleach and broken promises. The box sat on the floor of my cube-sized room like an accusation, like a grenade. Because here's what they don't tell you about aging out. You spend your whole childhood waiting for the day you're free to write your own story. But when that day comes, you realize someone else already wrote the ending for you. My grandfather, Thomas Callahan, was supposed to be my rock. Instead, he crumbled, leaving me to the tide of group homes and case files and counselors who looked at me with clinical pity. Or so I thought. The box held a different truth. The shoebox wasn't supposed to change anything. 18 years in the system, and this was my inheritance. One cardboard box, one check for $200, and one address to a transitional housing unit in Northeast Portland. The social worker's smile said, "Good luck." His eyes said, "Don't come back." I could have left the box sealed. Could have shoved it under the bed in that beige cube they called a room and pretended my grandfather never existed. For 10 years, Thomas Callahan had been a ghost. The man who abandoned me when I was 8, the reason I knew every group home in Oregon by smell. But on the third night, the silence got too loud. Inside, there wasn't much. Faded photographs, a leather Bible with his name embossed in flaking gold, and tucked between the pages of Job, the story of a man who lost everything, a folded document that didn't make sense. A quitclaim deed, 40 acres in Millbrook, Vermont, a place I'd never heard of, and a handwritten note in the margin dated 1 month before he died. Find the workshop. Find the 7 boxes. Don't trust Raymond Pierce. The box was supposed to be a period at the end of a sentence. Instead, it was a question mark. And question marks are dangerous things. My name is Iris Callahan. This is the story of how I found out everything I believed about my life was a lie. The fluorescent lights in Henry Morrison's office buzzed like dying insects. They'd been buzzing the same way since I was 8 years old, since the first time I sat in that chair across from his metal desk and learned what the word temporary meant. Temporary placement, temporary housing, temporary guardian. 10 years of temporary. Henry had aged in that decade. His hair had gone from brown to gray to white at the temples. The lines around his eyes had deepened, but his voice still had that social worker quality, warm and smooth, like river stones shaped by years of saying the same things to kids like me. He slid the box across the desk on July 15th, 2026. My 18th birthday. The day I aged out. "This is everything, Iris," he said. "Everything we have from your grandfather's effects. effects, like he was a movie, like his whole life could fit in a box the size of a shoebox sealed with tape gone yellow with time. I didn't reach for it right away, just looked at it sitting there between us. Brown cardboard, no markings except a case number written in black marker. File 2016-3847. That's what I'd been for 10 years. A number. There's also this. Henry slid an envelope across the desk. Official looking, cream-colored paper. The return address said Blackwell and Associates Attorneys at Law, Millbrook, Vermont. What is it? Notification of inheritance. Apparently, your grandfather owned property. You have 30 days from today to claim it, or it reverts to the state. I looked at the envelope, then at Henry. He left me something. Seems that way. Why didn't anyone tell me before? Henry's expression shifted. Something uncomfortable moved behind his eyes. The trust was set up to activate on your 18th birthday, not before. Those were the terms. Did you know? All this time, did you know? He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I knew there was property. I didn't know what kind or where. The attorney contacted us 6 months ago to confirm your location. I was instructed not to inform you until today. The anger came fast and hot. So I could have had family, could have had a place to go, but instead I've been bouncing between group homes because of some legal technicality. Iris. His voice was gentle. Your grandfather put you in state care for a reason. Whatever that reason was, he felt strongly enough about it to make it legal, to make it binding. The reason was he didn't want me. Henry looked at me for a long moment. Then he said something I didn't expect. I've been doing this job for 30 years. I've seen a lot of kids come through that door. Most of the time when family gives up a child, it's because they can't handle the responsibility. Addiction, mental illness, poverty. But your grandfather's case was different. He signed over custody voluntarily. No court order. No intervention. Just walked in one day with an 8-year-old girl and said he couldn't keep you safe. The room felt smaller suddenly. Couldn't keep me safe from what? He wouldn't say. I asked. Pushed, actually. But he just kept saying the same thing, that you'd be safer in the system than with him. That there were people who might use you to get to him. What people? He never said. I stared at the box, at the envelope. Henry cleared his throat. There's one more thing. When your grandfather signed the custody papers, he also left a letter for me, sealed. He told me to give it to you if you ever asked about him. He pulled open a drawer, retrieved a small envelope, edges worn soft with age. My name written on the front in careful block letters. Iris, when she asks. He knew I'd ask. He was counting on it. I took the envelope, held it in my hands. It weighed almost nothing. Henry stood, extended his hand.
You're aging out, Iris. That means you're on your own now. But if you need anything, if you run into trouble, you call me, day or night. You have my number.
I shook his hand. His grip was firm, warm. One more thing, he said. Be careful with Raymond Pierce. Who's that? The attorney mentioned him. Apparently, he's been trying to acquire your grandfather's property for years. Made multiple offers, all refused. Now that Thomas is gone, Pierce might try again with you. Just be careful. Don't sign anything without reading it. Better yet, don't sign anything without having someone else read it first. I picked up the box, the envelope from the attorney, Henry's letter. Good luck, Iris, Henry said. I mean that. I walked out of that office for the last time. Down the hallway with the scuffed linoleum and the posters about foster care success stories. Out into the Portland summer where the air smelled like hot asphalt and exhaust. I had $143 to my name, a check for $200 more, and a cardboard box that held the last pieces of a man I barely remembered. The transitional housing unit was in northeast Portland, wedged between a check-cashing place and a laundromat. 4 stories of brick and narrow windows. The lobby smelled like disinfectant and something else. Defeat, maybe. The particular scent of people who'd run out of options. The woman at the desk barely looked up when I came in. Just slid a clipboard across the counter. Name. Iris Callahan. She checked a list. Room 3C, 3rd floor. Elevator's broken. Stairs are at the end of the hall. Rent's $200 a month due on the 1st. Utilities included. No guests after 10. No drugs. No alcohol. No weapons. You're in the young adult program, so you get 6 months. After that, you're on your own. She handed me a key attached to a plastic diamond keychain. Welcome home. The room was exactly what I expected. Beige walls, beige carpet with stains that had been there longer than I'd been alive. A single bed with a mattress thin enough to count the springs through. A window that looked out onto a brick wall 2 feet away. One small closet, one smaller bathroom. This was freedom. I set the box on the floor, sat on the bed. The springs creaked. From somewhere down the hall, I could hear a television playing too loud. Canned laughter. Someone shouting about the noise. I looked at the box. It sat there in the middle of the beige carpet, accusing me, demanding something. But I wasn't ready. Not yet. I got a job 2 days later, washing dishes at a diner 6 blocks away. $4 an hour under the table, plus whatever tips the servers felt generous enough to split. I worked the dinner shift 5 to midnight, came home smelling like grease and industrial soap. The box stayed on the floor. I circled it like it was a bomb. Got up in the morning, stepped around it. Came home at night, kicked off my shoes beside it. It became part of the landscape of that small room. A fixture. A presence. On the 3rd night, I couldn't stand it anymore. The silence in the room was louder than the city outside. Louder than the couple fighting upstairs. louder than the traffic on the street below. I sat on the floor, pulled the box into my lap, slit the tape with my thumbnail. The air that puffed out smelled like old paper and cedar. It smelled like something I'd almost forgotten, something from before. Inside, the contents were sparse, carefully packed but sparse. A stack of photographs, edges soft with age. I pulled them out one by one. The first was my grandparents on their wedding day. Young. My grandmother wore a simple white dress, held a bouquet of daisies. My grandfather stood beside her in a dark suit, his hand on her waist. They were smiling at each other, not the camera, like the photographer had caught them in a private moment. Eleanor, that was my grandmother's name. I remembered her only in fragments. The smell of lavender, a soft voice singing, then nothing. She died when I was 5. The next photo was my grandfather holding me as a baby. His hands looked enormous, calloused and scarred from years of work. But the way he held me was gentle, like I was made of glass, like I was precious. There were more. Me as a toddler covered in sawdust, grinning at the camera. Me at maybe 6 or 7 holding a piece of wood I'd apparently sanded myself, looking proud. My grandfather in the background of that one, watching me with an expression I couldn't quite name. Love, maybe? Or something close to it. At the bottom of the stack was one more photo, different from the others. Older. 3 people standing in front of a wooden building. A sign above the door read, Callahan and Pierce Woodworks established 1975. My grandfather on the left, a younger version, maybe 30 years old. On the right, another man about the same age. Dark hair, easy smile. Between them, a woman with kind eyes. On the back, written in faded ink, Thomas William and Sarah. Opening day. I set the photos aside. Underneath was the Bible. Heavy. The leather cover worn soft at the edges, the spine cracked from years of opening to favorite passages. His name embossed on the front in letters that had once been gold, but were now just indentations in the leather. Thomas Callahan. I ran my fingers over the letters. It felt like touching a gravestone. I didn't open it right away, just held it. The weight of it was the only real thing in that empty room. The last piece of him. The man who'd taught me the names of trees, who'd let me help in his workshop, even when I was too small to really help, who'd read to me every night before bed, the man who in the end had left me. That was the story I'd polished with anger and grief for 10 years until it shone like a bitter truth. I was tired, so tired. I almost put it all back, almost shoved the box under the bed and let the ghost sleep. But my fingers found a slight bulge in the pages, a thickness that didn't feel right. I let the book fall open in my hands. It opened to the book of Job, the story of a man who lost everything. Tucked between the thin, crackling pages was a folded document, yellowed, brittle at the creases. My hands trembled as I carefully unfolded it. A quitclaim deed. Legal language swam before my eyes, but certain things were clear. Thomas Callahan grantor, Iris Callahan grantee. 40 acres of land more or less located at 127 Ridge Road, Millbrook, Vermont. Transfer date February 3rd, 2018, 1 month before he died. I read it 3 times. 4. Trying to make sense of it. He'd left me land, 40 acres in a place I'd never heard of. Why Vermont? We'd lived in Oregon. I'd been born in Oregon. As far as I knew, my grandfather had never left the Pacific Northwest. I turned the deed over. On the back, written in his familiar blocky handwriting, a note. Find the workshop. Find the 7 boxes. Don't trust Raymond Pierce. 7 boxes. Workshop. What workshop? I pulled out the envelope from the attorney, opened it with shaking hands. Inside a formal letter on heavy cream paper. Dear Miss Callahan, this office represents the estate of Thomas Callahan, deceased February 12th, 2018. As his sole heir, you are entitled to claim the property located at 127 Ridge Road, Millbrook, Vermont, pursuant to the terms of the Callahan Family Trust, established February 3rd, 2018. Please be advised that you must claim this inheritance within 30 days of your 18th birthday, or the property will revert to the state of Vermont. Your 18th birthday, as recorded in our files, is July 15th, 2026. If you wish to claim this property, please contact this office at your earliest convenience to arrange transfer of the deed and related documents. Please also be advised that there have been multiple inquiries regarding the sale of this property from interested parties. Should you wish to explore these offers, we would be happy to facilitate. Sincerely, Constance Blackwell, Esquire. Multiple inquiries, interested parties. Raymond Pierce. Henry's warning echoed in my head. I set the letter down, picked up the small envelope Henry had given me, the one my grandfather had left for him. Iris, when she asks. My heart was beating hard now. I could feel it in my throat. I tore open the envelope. Inside a single piece of notebook paper. His handwriting, the same careful block letters. Henry, if you're reading this to Iris, it means she's asking questions. Good. She should ask questions. She's smart enough to know when something doesn't add up. I can't tell her the truth. Not yet. Not until she's 18 and the property is legally hers, beyond anyone's reach. But I can tell you this, I didn't abandon her. Everything I did to keep her safe. There are people who would have used her to get to me. People who don't take no for an answer. The state was the only place I knew they couldn't touch her. I know what that cost her. I know what it cost me, but it was the only way. When she turns 18, she'll inherit the property in Millbrook. On that property is my workshop. In that workshop is the truth. Tell her I'm sorry. Tell her I loved her every single day. Tell her that some lies are told out of love, and tell her to be careful. Raymond Pierce won't give up easily. He's been looking for what I hid for almost 40 years. He won't stop just because I'm gone. Thomas Callahan, February 10th, 2018. I read the letter twice, 3 times. The narrative I'd built, the story of abandonment, the foundation I'd built my anger on, it crumbled. He didn't leave me. He hid me. I sat on the floor of that room for a long time. The box open in front of me. The deed, the letter, the photographs. Outside, the city moved on. Cars passed. People shouted. Someone laughed. But in that moment, everything had changed. I had 30 days. 30 days to get to Millbrook, Vermont, to find this workshop, to find 7 boxes that supposedly held the truth. I had $143 and a check for $200 more. It wasn't much, but it was enough, because sometimes all you need is a direction, even if that direction is based on a riddle left by a dead man. I pulled out my phone, searched for bus routes from Portland to Vermont. The cheapest option would take 3 days, multiple transfers, Portland to Boise, Boise to Denver, Denver to Chicago, Chicago to Albany, Albany to somewhere called Rutland, Vermont. Then I'd have to figure out how to get to Millbrook from there. Total cost $273. I counted my money again. Added the $200 check. $343 total. $70 left over for food and whatever came next. It wasn't smart. It wasn't practical. Any reasonable person would stay in Portland, get a better job, save money. Maybe contact the attorney and sell the property sight unseen. But I'd spent 10 years being practical, being reasonable, following rules set by people who didn't know me. My grandfather had left me a question mark, and I needed to know what came after it. I bought the bus ticket the next morning, left that afternoon. The bus smelled like chemical bathroom and stale air. The seats were narrow, upholstered in fabric worn smooth by thousands of bodies. I sat by a window near the back, the box on my lap, and watched Portland disappear behind me. I'd never left Oregon before, never had a reason to, never had the money. Now I watched the landscape change through dirty glass. The green of the Willamette Valley giving way to the brown of eastern Oregon. Then Idaho. Then the Rocky Mountains rising like broken teeth against the sky. I slept in fits. Woke when the bus stopped at depressing stations in small towns. Ate vending machine sandwiches and drank coffee that tasted like burnt rubber. In Chicago, I had a 6-hour layover. Spent it in a Greyhound station that smelled like desperation and floor cleaner. Watched people come and go. Families. Solo travelers. people who looked lost, people who looked like they'd been traveling forever. I wondered what I looked like to them. 18 years old, skinny, carrying everything I owned in a backpack and a shoebox. Probably just another kid running from something. The bus to Albany left at 2 in the morning. I slept hard this time, my head against the window, the vibration of the engine rattling my skull. When I woke, the landscape had changed again. Green. So much green. Rolling hills, dense forests, old barns leaning against time. Everything looked soft in the early morning light. Gentle. We reached Albany mid-morning. From there, a smaller bus to Rutland. This one had maybe 12 people on it. Older folks mostly. One woman with a baby that cried the whole way. Rutland was bigger than I expected. A real town with brick buildings and a main street. But even here, there was a sense of something ending. Empty storefronts. Buildings that needed paint. I found the information desk at the bus station. "Excuse me, how do I get to Millbrook?" The woman behind the counter looked up from her magazine. She was maybe 50, with reading glasses on a chain around her neck. "Millbrook, that's up in the hills. You got a car?" "No." "Then you're out of luck, hon. No bus goes up there. Used to be one, but the route got cut years ago when the mill closed." My stomach dropped. "Is there a taxi or an Uber?" She laughed, not unkindly. "Not much call for that sort of thing around here. You might find someone willing to drive you for cash, but it'll cost you." "How much?" She shrugged. $40-50 maybe. It's about 30 miles up mountain roads. I had $70 left. If I paid $50 for a ride, I'd have $20 to my name in a town I didn't know. The woman must have seen something in my face because her expression softened. "What's in Millbrook, if you don't mind me asking?" "I inherited property there from my grandfather." Her eyebrows went up. "You're not Thomas Callahan's granddaughter, are you?" The surprise must have shown on my face. "I knew your grandfather," she said. "Not well, mind you, but he used to come through here once a month or so. Always polite, always paid cash. Kept to himself mostly." She paused. "I heard he passed. I'm sorry." "Thank you." She studied me for a moment. Then she picked up a phone, dialed. "Ruth, it's Maggie down at the station." "Yeah, I'm good." "Listen, I've got Thomas Callahan's granddaughter here. She needs a ride up to Millbrook. You heading that way anytime soon?" A pause. Uh-huh. Okay, I'll tell her." She hung up. Ruth Harper runs the general store up in Millbrook. She's coming down for supplies this afternoon. She'll give you a ride back up. No charge. Says she knew your grandfather wants to help. Relief washed through me. "Thank you. Really." "You hungry?" "There's a diner across the street. Ruth won't be here for another 2 hours." I was starving. I'd eaten nothing but vending machine food for 3 days. The diner was called Mabel's. Red vinyl booths, black and white checkered floor. A counter with swivel stools. It looked like it hadn't changed since 1950. I ordered coffee and a grilled cheese sandwich. It cost $6. I left $1 tip. The sandwich was perfect, simple. The cheese melted just right, the bread toasted golden. I ate slowly, making it last, and watched the town through the window. People moved at a different pace here. No one was in a hurry. An old man sat on a bench across the street feeding pigeons. A woman swept the sidewalk in front of a flower shop. It was so different from Portland, from the group homes and the transitional housing, from the constant noise and movement. Here, things were still. Ruth Harper arrived in a pickup truck that had probably been red once, but was now more rust than paint. She was in her late 60s with steel gray hair pulled back in a bun and eyes that didn't miss much. "You must be Iris," she said, extending a weathered hand. "I'm Ruth." "Thank you for the ride. I can pay you." She waved that away. "Don't be silly. Your grandfather did me plenty of favors over the years. Never took a dime. I figure this squares us up a bit." I climbed into the passenger seat. The truck smelled like pine and old coffee. The radio was tuned to a country station playing low. We drove out of Rutland into the hills. The road got narrower, steeper. Trees pressed in on both sides, tall pines that blocked out most of the sky. "You've never been to Millbrook before," Ruth said. It wasn't a question. "No, ma'am. It's not much of a town anymore. Used to be bigger back when the lumber mill was running. Now it's mostly old folks like me who are too stubborn to leave, and a few young families who can't afford anywhere else." What was my grandfather like? The question came out before I could stop it. Ruth was quiet for a moment, navigating a sharp turn. "Thomas was a private man," she said finally. "Kept to himself mostly, but he was good, kind. Fixed my husband's fiddle once, wouldn't take any payment. Said the music was payment enough." She glanced at me. "He talked about you sometimes. Not a lot, but sometimes. Always said you were smart. Said you had his hands. His hands. For woodworking. He said you had the touch for it even when you were little." I looked down at my hands. Small, nails bitten short, calloused from washing dishes. "I don't remember that." "You were young when he sent you away. Makes sense you wouldn't remember much." "Did he tell you why? Why he put me in foster care?" Ruth's expression tightened. "He didn't talk about it, but there were rumors." "What kind of rumors?" "That he was protecting you from something or someone." She paused. "There was a man who came around sometimes, city type, always dressed nice, always asking about Thomas's property. Your grandfather never would see him. Told me once that some people don't know when to let things go." "Raymond Pierce." Ruth looked at me sharply. "That's the one. You know him." "I know he's been trying to buy the property." "For years," Ruth confirmed. Even after Thomas died, Pierce kept asking around town. Wanted to know if anyone knew about the will, about heirs. I told him to mind his own business. She turned off the main road onto something that was barely a road at all. Gravel. 2 ruts with grass growing between them. "We're almost there," she said. The trees opened up. I saw a valley below a handful of buildings clustered around a crossroads. A church with peeling white paint. A general store. A few houses that looked like they were slowly sinking back into the earth. This was Millbrook. Ruth pointed up a hill on the far side of the valley. "That's Ridge Road. Your grandfather's place is up there. You can't see it from here, but it's about a mile up." She drove through the town, which took all of 30 seconds, and started up the hill road. The truck's engine strained against the grade. "I should warn you," Ruth said. "The place has been empty for 8 years. I had someone check on it a few times, make sure the roof wasn't leaking, but other than that, it's been sitting." Someone checked on it. "Young man named Silas Hartwell. Does odd jobs around town. Carpentry mostly. Thomas taught him some before he passed." The road curved, and then I saw it. A mailbox leaning at an angle, the name Callahan barely visible under rust and grime. Beyond it, set back from the road, a house. 2 stories. Wood siding, weathered to a silvery gray. A porch that sagged slightly on one side. Windows intact, but covered in years of dirt. And behind it, mostly hidden by overgrown pine trees, the roof of another building. Larger. Metal rusted to a deep earthen red. The workshop. Ruth pulled up in front of the house, shut off the engine. "Home, sweet home," she said quietly. I got out. My legs felt shaky after 3 days on buses and 2 hours in the truck. The air was different here, clean, sharp. It smelled like pine and damp soil and something else, something I'd almost forgotten. Memory. I'd been here before, not to this place exactly, but to air like this. To silence like this. My grandfather's workshop in Oregon had smelled like this, like sawdust and linseed oil and quiet work. "You want me to wait?" Ruth asked. "I can give you a ride back down to the store. You'll need supplies probably, food and such." "I'd appreciate that. Thank you." "Take your time. I'll be right here." I walked up the cracked concrete path to the house. Each step felt weighted, important. The front door was locked. The wood was swollen tight in its frame. I peered through a gap in the boards covering one window. Dust motes danced in slivers of light. I could just make out shapes of furniture covered in white sheets. Ghosts in a silent room. No one had lived here in a very long time. I made my way around the side of the house. The yard was completely overgrown. Grass up to my knees. Bushes gone wild. The path to the workshop was almost invisible, choked with weeds and brambles. I pushed through. Thorns caught on my jeans, branches whipped back into my face. And then I was standing in front of it, the workshop. It was massive, easily 3 times the size of the house, built from cinder blocks on the bottom half dark weathered wood on top. One large sliding door big enough for a truck. a smaller regular door beside it. Both were shut tight. The large door had a padlock the size of my fist, rust-caked and ancient-looking. I pulled on it. It didn't budge. I tried the smaller door. Locked. I circled the building looking for a window, a weakness, anything. There were a few high windows, too dirty to see through and too high to reach. The building was a fortress. I slumped down against the smaller door, defeated. 3 days of travel. $70 left to my name, and I couldn't even get inside. The frustration rose hot in my throat. Tears burned behind my eyes. I kicked at the dirt. A childish gesture. Pointless. And that's when I saw it. The birdhouse. It was nailed to one of the pine trees at the edge of the clearing. Simple. Lopsided. Clearly handmade. And I recognized it. The memory came back sharp and sudden. I was maybe 6 years old. Sunny afternoon. The smell of fresh-cut wood. My grandfather's hands guiding mine, showing me how to fit the pieces together. Every secret needs a safe place, Iris. The best places are the ones people see every day, but never really look at. My heart started hammering. I stood up, walked slowly toward the tree. The birdhouse was tilted, a piece of the roof missing. It looked like nothing, just a forgotten piece of yard junk. I reached up. My fingers brushed away a spider web. I felt around the small entrance hole, then along the bottom. There was a piece of wood there that felt different. Loose. I remembered now. He'd shown me a false bottom. My fingers found the notch. I pushed. A small wooden panel swung down. Inside, nestled in a bit of dried moss, was a key. Heavy, made of old, dark brass. Not a house key. Bigger. Industrial. I pulled it out. My hand was shaking so badly I almost dropped it. I walked back to the smaller door of the workshop, wiped the grime from the keyhole with my thumb. The key slid in. It was stiff at first. I had to force it, putting my weight against it. Then it turned. There was a loud, satisfying clunk as the lock disengaged. I held my breath. I turned the knob, put my shoulder against the door, pushed. It groaned open on rusty hinges, scraping against the concrete floor. The air that rolled out was cool and still. It carried a scent I knew better than any other in the world. Sawdust, linseed oil, old iron. The holy trinity of my childhood. I stepped across the threshold. The door swung shut behind me, plunging me into near darkness. For a moment, I was blind. My heart pounded in the sudden quiet. Then, as my eyes adjusted, the space began to take shape around me. Light filtered through the dirty upper windows. Thin shafts cutting through dust that hung suspended in the air like snow that had forgotten how to fall. The workshop was cavernous. Long workbenches lined the walls covered in canvas cloths. Larger machines stood in the center of the room like sleeping iron beasts. A bandsaw, a drill press, a massive lathe. Shavings and dust lay thick on every surface. A decade of stillness. I walked deeper into the space. My footsteps echoed. I ran my hand along a workbench, leaving a clean streak in the dust. Underneath, I could feel the nicks and scars in the wood. A history of work written into the surface. I pulled a cloth off a set of tools. Chisels, dozens of them. Their wooden handles worn smooth by his hands. Their steel edges still gleaming faintly in the dim light. I picked one up. The weight of it was familiar, comfortable. I could almost feel the phantom pressure of his hand guiding mine. He had tried to teach me. I was clumsy, impatient. I'd wanted to play outside, not learn the slow, patient language of wood. A pang of regret, sharp and sudden, went through my chest. All those hours I'd wasted. All those lessons I'd refused to learn. I moved through the workshop slowly, examining, remembering. There were shelves of wood, boards of different types, different colors, labels written in his careful handwriting. Maple, cherry, walnut, oak. There were jars of nails sorted by size. Cans of varnish and stain their labels faded. Rolls of sandpaper in different grits. Everything organized, everything in its place. This had been his sanctuary. At the far end of the workshop, against the back wall, stood a massive roll-top desk. It was the only piece of furniture that didn't look like it belonged. Elegant, made of dark cherry wood, a stark contrast to the utilitarian world around it. It looked like the heart of the place, the command center. I approached it slowly. The roll top was locked. I tried to lift it. It wouldn't budge. I tried the drawers, locked tight. Of course, because nothing about this could be simple. I looked around the workshop for something to pry it open. A crowbar, a heavy mallet. Part of me screamed that this was desecration, that I shouldn't be breaking into his things. But a stronger part, the part that had survived 10 years in the system, knew that sometimes you had to break things to find the truth. I found a wide, flat-headed chisel and a small sledgehammer. I wedged the chisel into the seam of the roll top, gave it a sharp rap with the hammer. The wood groaned in protest. I did it again, harder this time. There was a crack. A piece of the locking mechanism splintered. The roll top shuddered, slid upward an inch. It was enough. I got my fingers under it, heaved. It rolled up with a reluctant screech of wood on wood. The interior of the desk was a maze of pigeonholes and small drawers, all of them stuffed with papers, schematics, notebooks. the organized chaos of a brilliant mind. And right in the center, in the largest compartment, a thick envelope. Manila. Old. My name was written on the front in his familiar blocky script. Iris, for your 18th birthday. My breath hitched. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a forgotten asset. This was a message, a final letter, a time capsule of intent. He had known I would come here. He had trusted I would find my way. I sank into the dusty chair in front of the desk, the envelope in my hands. It felt impossibly heavy. This was it, the moment of truth. The ghost was about to speak. I was terrified of what he was going to say. I carefully broke the seal, slid out a thick stack of papers, letters, dozens of pages covered in his handwriting. On the very top, a single sheet, dated February 5th, 2018, 1 week before he died. My dearest Iris, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and you are finally a woman grown, 18 years old, the age where the law says you can make your own choices. I imagine you are angry with me. I imagine you feel that I abandoned you. I need you to know that putting you into the state's care was the hardest thing I have ever done in my life. It was not abandonment, my girl. It was a desperate act of protection. I had to stop reading. The words blurred through tears. Protection. The same word Henry had used. How was a decade of cold rooms and colder comfort protection? I wiped my eyes on my sleeve, forced myself to continue. The story, you know, the story everyone knows, is incomplete. There are things I could never tell you when you were young. Things I could barely admit to myself. I need to start at the beginning. In 1975, I opened a woodworking shop with my best friend. His name was William Pierce. We'd been friends since high school. He was talented, brilliant with design. I was good with my hands, good at bringing his visions to life. We called it Callahan and Pierce Woodworks. For 7 years, we built furniture, cabinets, beautiful things. We made a good living. Your grandmother and I bought a house. William married a woman named Sarah. They had 3 children. Then Sarah got sick. Cancer. It took her fast. She died in 1981. William fell apart, started drinking, started gambling. By 1982, he was in debt to people you don't want to know. Dangerous people. He'd been stealing from the business to pay them. $47,000. I discovered it in March of 1982. I confronted him. What happened next, I have never told anyone. Not the police, not your grandmother, not a single soul. William didn't come to the workshop that night to apologize. He came with a gun. He planned to kill me and make it look like an accident. He thought if I was dead, he could claim I'd been the one stealing, could sell the business. pay his debts. But in the struggle, the gun went off. William died. I could have called the police, could have claimed self-defense. It would have been the truth. But William had 3 children. Samuel was 12. David was 9. Grace was 7. Their mother had just died. If the town knew their father was a thief and had tried to commit murder, those children would have carried that shame for the rest of their lives. So I made a choice. I spent every dollar I had helping them, paying for their education, making sure they had opportunities. Samuel became a doctor. David became a lawyer. Grace became a teacher. They never knew it was me helping them. I did it anonymously, and I would do it again. But there was a cost. William's son, Raymond, never forgave me. He was 18 when his father died. Old enough to hate, but too young to understand. For 40 years, Raymond has believed I killed his father. He's been looking for proof, for revenge. In 2015, he found out about the money I'd been giving his siblings. He confronted me, demanded I confess publicly that I'd driven his father to suicide so he could sue me, take everything. When I refused, he threatened to go after anyone I cared about. You were 7 years old. I couldn't let him use you as leverage. Couldn't let him hurt you to get to me, so I did the only thing I could think of. I put you somewhere he couldn't reach you, somewhere he couldn't threaten you or manipulate you. The state system. It was cold. I know that. It was cruel, but it was safe. Raymond couldn't touch you there, couldn't use you to force my hand. I bought this property with the last of my money, put it in a trust that would activate on your 18th birthday, made it legally untouchable, and I moved here, to the middle of nowhere, where Raymond couldn't find me. I spent the last 8 years of my life alone, missing you every single day, hating myself for what I'd done to you. But you were safe, and that was all that mattered. The letter fell from my fingers onto the desk. The narrative of my life, the foundation I'd built my identity on, crumbled. He hadn't abandoned me. He had hidden me. He had sacrificed his own heart, his own reputation, his final years, just to build a wall around me. The anger I'd carried for a decade dissolved, replaced by a wave of grief so profound it felt like drowning. Not grief for my lost childhood anymore. Grief for his. Grief for the lonely years he must have spent in this workshop, hiding from the world, missing me. I cried. I sat in that dusty chair in that silent workshop and cried for the little girl who'd felt unloved. And I cried for the old man who had loved her so much he'd torn his own world apart to save hers. I cried until my throat was raw and my eyes were swollen. When the tears finally stopped, a strange calm settled over me. The silence of the workshop no longer felt like a tomb. It felt like an embrace. It felt like him. I picked up the next page of the letter. There is more you need to know, and I'm running out of time to tell you. This workshop holds 7 boxes. Wooden boxes I made with my own hands. Each one contains proof of what I've told you. Proof of the money I spent helping William's children. Proof of what really happened that night. 6 of the boxes are for William's family. Samuel David Grace, Joseph Hartwell, Eleanor, and William himself. The 7th box is for me, for the truth I've carried alone. If you choose to open them, you will have all the evidence you need to clear my name, to prove to Raymond that I am not the villain he thinks I am. But I'm leaving that choice to you, because clearing my name means revealing what his father really was. It means destroying the memory those 3 siblings have of their father. You will have to decide what matters more, truth or mercy, justice or love. Whatever you choose, know that I have loved you every moment of every day since you were born. You have my hands, Iris. I saw it when you were little. You have the touch for this work. If you choose to stay, if you choose to learn, this workshop is yours. All of it. The tools, the knowledge, the peace. If you choose to leave to sell it all and start fresh somewhere else, I understand that too. The choice is yours. I love you, my girl, always. Grandfather Thomas. I sat there for a long time, the letter in my lap, his words echoing in the quiet air. 7 boxes. Somewhere in this workshop, there were 7 boxes that held the truth. I stood slowly, looked around the vast space. Where would he hide them? I walked the perimeter of the workshop looking for anything that seemed out of place. A loose floorboard, a hidden panel. Nothing. Then I remembered the note on the deed. Find the workshop. Find the 7 boxes. Not in the workshop. Find the workshop itself. There had to be more to this building than what I was seeing. I went to the back wall, started tapping on panels, listening for hollow sounds. Nothing. I checked the floor, looking for seams, trapdoors. Nothing. I was about to give up when I noticed something. The workbench against the far wall was positioned strangely. There was a gap between it and the wall, just a few inches, not quite enough to be useful for storage. I squeezed behind it, ran my hands along the wall, and felt a draft. Cold air coming from somewhere. I looked down. There was a small iron ring set flush with the floor, nearly invisible under decades of dust and sawdust. a trap door. I grabbed the ring, pulled. The door was heavy, wooden, but it lifted with a groan of hinges that hadn't moved in years. Below, darkness, and a set of wooden stairs descending into it. I pulled out my phone, turned on the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness below. I could see a small room, maybe 10 feet by 10 feet. Wooden walls, wooden shelves. And on those shelves, arranged in a careful circle, 7 wooden boxes, each one maybe a foot long, 8 inches wide, 6 inches deep. Beautiful, handcrafted, the wood glowing even under the dust, and each one had a name carved into the lid. Eleanor Callahan, William Pierce, Joseph Hartwell, Samuel Pierce, David Pierce, Grace Pierce, Thomas Callahan. I descended the stairs slowly, each step creaking under my weight. The air down here was cool, still, like a tomb. I reached the bottom, stood in front of the 7 boxes. The ghost had left me his truth. Now I had to decide what to do with it. Outside, I could hear Ruth's truck idling, waiting. I looked at the boxes, at the names carved into wood that had been shaped by his hands. Tomorrow, I would open them. Tomorrow, I would learn the whole truth. But for now, for this moment, I just stood there, in my grandfather's secret room, surrounded by his final gifts. The girl who thought she'd been abandoned, standing in the evidence of love so fierce, it had shaped every choice of a man's last years. I reached out, touched the box marked Eleanor Callahan. The wood was smooth, warm somehow despite the cool air. And for the first time in 10 years, I felt like I'd come home. The box marked Eleanor Callahan was the only one already open. I discovered this when I tried the small brass latch on the front. It clicked without resistance, and the lid lifted with a whisper of old hinges. Inside, nestled in a bed of burgundy velvet that had faded to dusty rose, lay 3 items. A leather-bound journal, its cover soft with age. A photograph in a silver frame, tarnished but still beautiful. And a letter sealed in an envelope that had yellowed at the edges. The photograph showed my grandparents on their wedding day. The same image I'd seen in the box from Henry Morrison, but this one was larger, clearer. Eleanor wore a simple white dress with lace at the collar. Thomas stood beside her in a dark suit, his hand on her waist, both of them caught in a moment of private joy. They looked so young, so full of hope. I set the photograph aside carefully and picked up the envelope. It was addressed in my grandmother's handwriting, elegant and sloping. For Iris, to be read when you are old enough to understand. My hands trembled as I opened it. The letter inside was dated August 15th, 2012. 4 months before she died. My dearest Iris, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and your grandfather has kept his promise to give you this letter when you turned 18. I am writing this from the hospital. The doctors say I have maybe 4 months. Your grandfather refuses to believe them, but I can feel it in my bones. This is the beginning of the end. I want you to know the truth about our family, about the choices we made, about why Thomas will do what he's about to do. Your grandfather is the best man I have ever known, but he carries a burden that has shaped every year of our marriage. A burden I'm afraid he will carry alone once I'm gone. In 1982, something happened that changed everything. Thomas's best friend, William Pierce, came to our workshop with a gun. He was desperate, drowning in gambling debts, and he had decided that the only way out was to kill Thomas and blame him for money that had gone missing from their business. Your grandfather could have died that night, but in the struggle, it was William who fell. Thomas had every right to claim self-defense. The evidence was there. The truth was on his side. But William had 3 young children who had just lost their mother to cancer. And Thomas, my beautiful, heartbroken Thomas, decided that those children deserved to remember their father as a good man who made mistakes, not as someone who tried to commit murder. So he lied. He told the police and the whole town that William had taken his own life out of shame over the embezzlement. He let everyone believe he had driven his friend to suicide by confronting him too harshly. For 30 years, he has been hated for this, blamed, shunned by people who used to be friends, and he never once defended himself. Instead, he spent every dollar we had helping William's children. Anonymous scholarships, medical bills paid by mystery benefactors, rent assistance from unnamed sources. We sold our house in Portland, sold the original workshop, moved to a smaller place, lived simply so that Samuel, David, and Grace Pierce could have futures. Thomas never wanted recognition. He never wanted gratitude. He just wanted those children to have a chance. But William's oldest son, Raymond, never forgave Thomas for his father's death. Raymond was 18 when it happened, old enough to remember everything, old enough to hate. For years, Raymond searched for evidence that Thomas had actually killed his father. He became a lawyer, I think, just so he would have the tools to pursue this vendetta. In 2015, Raymond discovered that Thomas had been helping his siblings financially. He confronted your grandfather, demanded that Thomas publicly confess to driving William to suicide so Raymond could sue him for wrongful death. When Thomas refused, Raymond made a threat. He said he would go after anyone Thomas cared about, anyone Thomas loved. He mentioned you by name, Iris. You were 7 years old. That night, Thomas came home and wept. I had never seen him cry before. Not even when William died.
not even during the worst of the hatred from the town. But the thought of someone hurting you broke him. We talked for hours. I begged him to go to the police to finally tell the truth about what happened in 1982.
But he refused. He said that revealing the truth would destroy the lives of 3 innocent people who had done nothing wrong. Samuel, David, and Grace didn't deserve to learn that their father had been a thief and a would-be murderer. So Thomas made a different choice. He decided to put you somewhere Raymond couldn't reach you. Somewhere you would be protected by the very system Raymond, as a lawyer, couldn't manipulate. He put you in state care. Iris, it destroyed him. Every day after that, he was a little more broken, a little more hollow. I watched the man I loved waste away with grief and guilt. When I got my diagnosis in 2012, I made him promise me something. I made him promise that when you turned 18, he would give you the truth, all of it. And he would give you a choice to forgive or not forgive, to understand or not understand. I won't be there to see what you decide, but I pray that you will see your grandfather for what he truly is. Not a man who abandoned you, but a man who loved you so much he was willing to become the villain in your story to keep you safe. Be kind to him, Iris. He has been so hard on himself. And be kind to yourself. None of this was your fault. All my love, Grandmother Eleanor. I read the letter 3 times, 4 times. Each time the weight of what they had carried, what they had sacrificed, pressed heavier on my chest. Eleanor had died knowing what was coming, knowing Thomas would have to give me up, knowing he would spend his last years alone. And she couldn't stop it, could only write this letter and hope I would understand. I carefully folded the letter and placed it back in the envelope, set it beside the photograph. Then I picked up the journal. The first entry was dated June 3rd, 1974. The day after their wedding, Mrs. Eleanor Callahan, it began. I'm trying the name out, seeing how it looks in ink. It looks wonderful. I flipped through the pages. Years of entries, her life in careful handwriting, the joy of their early marriage, the struggle to start the business, the friendship with William and Sarah Pierce, the birth of my mother Catherine in 1980, then the entries about Sarah's illness in 1981, the grief of watching a friend die too young, then the change in William after Sarah's death, Eleanor's growing concern. March 15th, 1982. Something terrible has happened. Thomas won't tell me what, not all of it, but William is dead. The police say suicide. The town is saying Thomas drove him to it. I know my husband. I know his heart. Whatever happened, he did what he thought was right. But I can see the weight of it settling on his shoulders like stones. I'm afraid of what this will do to him. The entries after that were shorter, more strained. She wrote about the town's hatred, about friends who stopped calling, about the slow financial decline as Thomas poured money into helping William's children. She never complained, never suggested he should stop. Instead, she wrote about how proud she was of him, how much she loved him, even as they lost everything. There was an entry from 1995 when my mother, Catherine, died in a car accident. I was barely a year old. Thomas and I are raising Iris now. She's all we have left of Catherine. She's perfect, beautiful, smart. Thomas says she has his hands, says she'll be a woodworker someday. I hope she gets the chance. I hope the shadows of the past don't steal her future the way they've stolen so much of ours. The last entry was dated August 10th, 2012, 5 days before the letter. The pain is getting worse. The morphine helps, but it also makes everything foggy. Thomas sits beside my bed every day, reads to me, holds my hand. Yesterday, he told me about Raymond's threat, about his plan to put Iris in state care. I wanted to fight him on it, wanted to tell him there had to be another way. But I know my husband. When he makes a decision like this, it's because he's examined every other option and found them wanting. He's going to sacrifice his last years to keep our granddaughter safe, and I won't be here to help him through it. I'm so angry at this disease. Not because it's taking me, but because it's forcing Thomas to face the hardest choice of his life alone. If you're reading this, Iris, please know that your grandfather is the bravest, most selfless man I've ever known. And everything he did out of love. I closed the journal carefully, placed it back in the box. For a long moment, I just sat there on the floor of that underground room, surrounded by the evidence of a love story that had been shaped by impossible choices. Above me, I heard footsteps. I looked up to see Ruth Harper's face peering down through the trapdoor backlit by the workshop lights. "Iris, you okay down there? You've been gone a while." I realized I had no idea how long I'd been sitting here. Time had stopped meaning anything. "I'm okay," I called up. My voice was rough. "I'll be right up." I climbed the stairs slowly, Eleanor's letter still in my hand. Ruth was standing beside the trapdoor, looking concerned. I was starting to worry. "You find what you were looking for." I looked at her. This woman who had known my grandfather, who had defended him against Raymond Pierce. "Did you know," I asked, "about William Pierce? About what really happened?" Ruth's expression shifted. I knew there was more to that story than folks said. Thomas was too good a man to have done what they accused him of. She paused. But I never pried. Figured if he wanted to tell me, he would. He was protecting William's children. He let the whole town hate him to protect them. Ruth nodded slowly. "That sounds like Thomas." She looked at me with kind eyes. You must be hungry. When's the last time you ate? I tried to remember. The grilled cheese in Rutland. That was 6 hours ago? 7 a while, I admitted. Come on, let's get you back to the store. I've got soup on the stove and bread from this morning. You can tell me what you need, and we'll figure out the next steps. I looked back at the trap door, at the 6 remaining boxes waiting in the darkness below. I need to open the rest of them, I said. The other 6 boxes, but I don't think I can do it today. Then don't. They've been waiting 8 years. They can wait one more night. Ruth drove me back down the hill to Millbrook. The sun was setting, painting the valley in shades of gold and amber. The little town looked almost beautiful in that light. Harper's General Store was exactly what it sounded like. One large room with shelves stocked with essentials. Canned goods, bread, milk, basic hardware, a wood stove in the corner for heat in winter, a counter with an old-fashioned register. Behind the store was Ruth's house, a small cottage that smelled like cinnamon and old wood. She sat me at her kitchen table and ladled out beef stew from a pot that had been simmering all day. Set down thick slices of homemade bread with butter. I ate like I was starving, because I was. Ruth sat across from me with a cup of tea, watching me with the patient expression of someone who had raised children and knew when to speak and when to stay quiet. When I finally slowed down, she said, "You planning to stay or sell?" "I don't know yet." "Raymond Pierce will make you an offer. Probably already has one drawn up. He's been waiting for this moment for years." "Why does he want the property so badly?" Ruth considered this. "I don't think it's about the property. I think it's about winning, about finally getting something from Thomas, even if it's just land. My grandfather left me 7 boxes. They contain proof of what really happened in 1982. Proof that William Pierce tried to kill him, that my grandfather was innocent." Ruth set down her teacup carefully. "And if you show Raymond that proof, then he'll know his father wasn't who he thought he was, and so will his siblings. That's a heavy burden to carry, deciding something like that. My grandfather carried it for 44 years. And you think you should do the same?" I didn't have an answer for that. Ruth stood, went to a drawer, and pulled out a key ring with 2 keys on it. "The house key and the workshop key. I've been holding on to them since Thomas passed. They're yours now." She set them on the table. "There's a bed upstairs in the house. Probably dusty, but the mattress should be okay. Linens are in the hall closet. You need anything else, you come get me. I'm right here." "Thank you for everything. Thomas was a good man. I'm glad someone's here to remember that." I walked back up Ridge Road as the last light faded from the sky. The house looked different in the darkness, less abandoned, almost welcoming. I unlocked the front door. It stuck a bit, but eventually gave way. Inside, I found the light switches. Most of them worked. The power was still on, which surprised me until I remembered that Silas Hartwell had been maintaining the place. The furniture was exactly as I'd glimpsed through the window, covered in white sheets. I pulled them off one by one, releasing clouds of dust. A couch, 2 chairs, a bookshelf, a dining table. All of it simple, well made, probably crafted by my grandfather's hands. Upstairs, I found the bedroom Ruth had mentioned. The bed was covered but intact. I found sheets in the closet exactly where she'd said. They smelled like cedar and thyme. I made the bed, lay down fully clothed. And despite everything, despite the weight of what I'd learned, I fell asleep almost immediately. For the first time in 10 years, I slept without the sounds of other people in nearby rooms, without the institutional smell of industrial cleaners and shared spaces. I slept in my grandfather's house, and I dreamed of woodworking. I woke to sunlight streaming through dusty windows and the sound of a truck pulling up outside. I went downstairs, looked out the front window. A pickup truck newer than Ruth's sat in the driveway. A man was getting out, young, maybe 30, work clothes, tool belt. He saw me through the window and raised a hand in greeting. I opened the door. "You must be Iris," he said. "I'm Silas Hartwell. Ruth called this morning, said you might need some help getting the place livable." Silas Hartwell. The man Ruth had mentioned, the one my grandfather had taught. "You knew my grandfather?" "Yes, ma'am. He taught me woodworking for about 4 years before he passed. Best teacher I ever had." He paused. "I'm sorry for your loss. I know it's been years, but still." "Thank you." He gestured to the house. "I've been checking on the place a few times a year, making sure the roof wasn't leaking, pipes weren't frozen in winter. But it could use a proper cleaning if you're planning to stay." "I am, at least for a while." "Well then, let me help. I've got time today." We spent the morning cleaning. Silas showed me how to get the water heater working, how to clear the debris from the gutters where the circuit breaker was. He worked efficiently, quietly, respectfully. Around noon, he wiped his hands on his jeans and said, "Your grandfather told me something before he died. He said if a woman named Iris ever showed up, I was supposed to help her open 6 boxes. Said you'd know what that meant." I looked at him carefully. "He told you about the boxes, not what was in them, just that they existed, that they were important, and that you'd need help opening them because each one had a different lock mechanism." "Why would I need help with locks?" "Because he designed them that way. Each box is a puzzle. He said it was his way of making sure you took your time, made sure you really wanted to know what was inside before you opened them. And you know how to solve these puzzles." He taught me some of it, not all. Said some of it you'd have to figure out yourself. I made a decision. The boxes are in the workshop. There's a trapdoor under the far workbench. Silas nodded. I know. I helped him build that room. We walked to the workshop together. The morning sun made the building look less ominous than it had yesterday. Inside, Silas went straight to the trapdoor, lifted it without hesitation, descended the stairs like he'd done it 100 times. Maybe he had. I followed him down. The 7 boxes sat exactly where I'd left them. Silas pulled a small flashlight from his tool belt and examined each one. You opened Eleanor's box already, he said. That one was meant to be easy, but the others... He ran his hand over the box marked William Pierce. These are going to take some work. How long? Depends on how good you are at reading his mind. Over the next 3 days, Silas and I worked on opening the boxes. The box marked William Pierce was first. Silas showed me that the lock wasn't a traditional keyhole. It was a numerical combination, but the numbers were hidden behind a sliding wooden panel. There's a clue somewhere, Silas said. Something in his journals or his workshop, a date that mattered to him. That's how he designed these. I thought about the letter, about the story. March 14th, 1982, I said. The night William died. Silas nodded. Try it. I slid the panel to reveal 6 rotating wooden wheels, each carved with numbers 0 through 9. I set them to 031482. There was a soft click. The lid opened. Inside, nestled in dark velvet, were documents. So many documents. Receipts for William Pierce's gambling debts. $47,000 owed to various entities, none of them banks. Some of them had names that sounded like people. Others were just initials. This one was from Thomas to William, dated March 13th, 1982. The day before William died. It was never sent. William, I know about the money. I've known for weeks. I'm not angry. I'm heartbroken. Not because of the theft, though that stings, but because you didn't come to me sooner.
We could have fixed this together. We could have worked something out, and that you let it grow into something that's eating you alive.
Sarah's death broke you. I understand that. Losing someone you love that much changes a person in ways that can't be predicted. But your children need you. Samuel, David, and Grace need their father. Whatever you're planning, whatever you're thinking, please reconsider. Come talk to me. We'll figure it out together. We always have. Your friend, Thomas. He had known, had tried to reach out, and William had come to the workshop anyway, with a gun instead of words. I closed the box carefully. 1 down, Silas said quietly. 5 to go. The box marked Joseph Hartwell was next. Silas looked at this one with particular intensity. Joseph was my father, he said. He died when I was 12. I never knew much about him except that he was a good man who worked hard. You didn't know your grandfather helped him. Not until Thomas told me, and even then he didn't give me details. Just said my dad had been one of the people he'd helped over the years. This lock required a key, but the key was hidden somewhere in the workshop. The clue was carved into the bottom of the box in tiny letters. The engineer's dream. We searched for hours, looking through drawers, shelves, tools. Finally, I found it in a book. A textbook on civil engineering, specifically on load-bearing structures. The kind of book a student at MIT might use. Tucked in the chapter on bridge design was a brass key, small and delicate. It fit perfectly. Inside the box were scholarship documents. A full 4-year scholarship to MIT for Joseph Hartwell, funded by an anonymous donor. The amount, $120,000. There were also photographs. Joseph as a young man graduating from MIT in his cap and gown, grinning at the camera. Joseph in a hard hat at a construction site pointing at blueprints. Joseph holding a baby. Silas, I realized. And a letter written in Thomas's handwriting, dated 1996. Joseph, you don't know me, and I prefer it that way. But I knew your father. He was a good man who made some mistakes. He didn't deserve what happened to him. You have a gift for building things. I've seen your aptitude scores your grades. Don't let poverty keep you from your potential. This scholarship is not charity. It's an investment in the future. Use it well. Build things that last. Build things that matter. And when you have children of your own, teach them that people are worth more than profit. Someone who believes in you. Silas read the letter twice, then carefully folded it and put it back in the box. He never knew. Silas said, his voice rough. My dad never knew who helped him. I think that's how my grandfather wanted it. Why? Because then there was no debt, no obligation. Your father could believe he'd earned it on his own merit. Silas was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, We should keep going. The boxes for Samuel, David, and Grace Pierce followed the same pattern. Each one contained evidence of substantial financial support. College tuition, medical bills, housing assistance, all anonymous, all carefully documented. Samuel Pierce had received $150,000 for medical school, plus 10 years of rent assistance while he completed his residency. David Pierce had received $130,000 for law school, plus funding to start his own practice in civil rights law. Grace Pierce had received $110,000 for her teaching degree, plus money for medical care, when her daughter was born with a heart defect. The total amount Thomas had spent helping William Pierce's children over 30 years, $564,000. More than $500,000. Every penny he'd ever earned from the sound of it. Each box also contained a letter. Personal. Specific to each person. To Samuel, become the healer your mother would have been proud of. To David, use the law to protect people who can't protect themselves. to grace. Teach children that kindness matters more than wealth. They were blessings from a man who had every reason to hate their father, but chose instead to ensure they had futures. By the end of the 4th day, 6 boxes were open. Only one remained. The box marked Thomas Callahan. Silas and I sat on the floor of the underground room staring at it. "This is the one that matters most," Silas said. "This is the one with the whole truth." "How do you know?" "Because he told me. Said that box 7 was the only one that could clear his name completely, but that opening it was your choice and yours alone." I looked at the box. It was identical to the others in size and construction, but the lock mechanism was different, more complex. Carved into the lid was a single word: forgiveness. "The lock requires a code," Silas said. 8 digits, but I don't know what they are. Thomas said only you would know." "How would I know I was 8 when he put me in the system? I barely remember anything from before that." "Think, what date would matter to you? What numbers would be significant?" I thought about it, tried different combinations in my head. His birthday. Number, Eleanor's birthday, no. The date William died, that opened a different box. Then it hit me. My birthday, July 15th, 2008. I reached for the rotating wheels on the lock. Set them carefully. 07152008. There was a click so soft, I almost didn't hear it. The lid lifted. Inside was a USB drive, labeled in his handwriting, "The Truth." March 14th, 1982. And beneath it, a police ballistics report. Official, dated March 16th, 1982. I pulled out the report, scanned it. 2 shots fired. 1 bullet lodged in the east wall of the workshop approximately 6 feet high. Trajectory consistent with struggle for the weapon. 2nd bullet entered victim's chest at close range. Gunpowder residue on victim's hands. Gunpowder residue on Thomas Callahan's hands and shirt. Conclusion: evidence consistent with both suicide and potential struggle. Due to presence of suicide note and testimony from Thomas Callahan, manner of death ruled suicide. But someone had made a note in the margin handwritten. A detective's note. TC's story doesn't add up completely. No defensive wounds on him despite alleged confrontation. Victim's angle of entry unusual for self-inflicted wound. But suicide note is convincing and TC is cooperative. Family doesn't want investigation. Closing as suicide per family request. There had been doubt, but it had been ignored, and at the bottom of the box, one more letter. This one was dated February 5th, 2018, the same date as the letter in Eleanor's box. "Iris, this USB drive contains a video I recorded 1 week ago. In it, I tell you exactly what happened the night William Pierce died. I recorded it from my hospital bed. I'm dying. Cancer. The doctors give me days, maybe a week. I'm ready to go. I've been ready since Eleanor passed. But I needed to leave you this truth first. On this drive is evidence that would clear my name completely. It would prove that William came to kill me, that I acted in self-defense. But using this evidence means destroying the memory that 3 innocent people have of their father. Samuel, David, and Grace have lived good lives. They've built careers, raised families, contributed to their communities. They've done all of this believing their father was a good man who made a mistake. If you reveal this video, they will learn that their father was a thief and an attempted murderer. That the man who helped them all these years was the man they were taught to resent. I'm leaving this choice to you because I won't be here to face the consequences. If you choose to reveal the truth, you will be legally and morally in the clear. You'll keep the property. Raymond Pierce will have no claim against you. But you'll hurt 3 people who have done nothing to deserve that pain. If you choose to keep the secret, you'll be doing what I did, choosing mercy over justice. There is no right answer, Iris. Only the answer you can live with. Whatever you choose, know that I'm proud of you. You're stronger than I ever was. All my love. Grandfather Thomas, I held the USB drive in my hand. It was small, lightweight, barely anything at all. But it contained the power to change everything. Silas stood. I should go. This is something you need to decide alone. Wait, I said. How did you end up here? How did you find my grandfather? Silas leaned against the wall, hands in his pockets. When my dad died in 2008, we found letters. Dozens of them, from the anonymous donor who'd paid for his education. They were all signed the same way, someone who believes in you. My dad kept them his whole life. When I turned 18, I decided to find out who had written them. Took me months of detective work, following paper trails, making calls, finally tracked it to Millbrook, Vermont, to Thomas Callahan. I showed up at his door in 2014. Angry, actually. Wanted to know why some stranger had paid for my dad's education, what he wanted in return. Your grandfather invited me in, made me coffee, told me the whole story about William Pierce, about what he'd done for William's children. He said my dad wasn't William's son, but he'd been caught up in the same tragedy. That my dad's father had been involved in something connected to William's gambling debts. He said he'd helped my dad because every child deserves a chance regardless of their parents' mistakes. I didn't believe him at first. Thought it was some kind of con. Nobody does something like that without wanting something back. But I stuck around Millbrook for a few weeks, asked questions, learned that Thomas Callahan was exactly who he said he was. A man who'd spent 40 years quietly helping people and asking nothing in return. So I asked him to teach me woodworking the way he'd taught my father stability and education. He said yes. Silas looked at me. Your grandfather taught me that the best things we build aren't made of wood. They're made of choices. small choices every day to do the right thing, even when it costs us. He was the best man I've ever known. And I think you're a lot like him. He left me alone in the underground room with 7 open boxes and an impossible choice. I climbed the stairs, closed the trapdoor behind me, walked out of the workshop into the late afternoon sun. The valley below was peaceful, quiet. A few houses with smoke rising from chimneys. The general store, the church. A place that had hated my grandfather for 44 years. I could change that, could clear his name, could make them all know they'd been wrong. But at what cost? I thought about Samuel, David, and Grace Pierce. 3 people I'd never met. 3 people whose lives had been shaped by my grandfather's secret generosity. Did they deserve to have their father's memory destroyed? Did my grandfather deserve to be remembered as the villain? There was no right answer. I sat down on the workshop steps, watched the sun sink lower, and for the first time since arriving in Millbrook, I thought about Raymond Pierce, the man who had threatened a 7-year-old girl. The man who had spent 44 years hating someone who had saved his siblings. According to Ruth, he'd been asking about the property, waiting for his chance. He would come soon, and when he did, I would have to decide. Truth or mercy, justice or love. As the last light faded from the sky, I made my decision, but I would need help to carry it out. I walked back down to Harper's General Store. Ruth was closing up, pulling down the shades, counting the register. "Ruth," I said, "I need to talk to Raymond Pierce." She looked up sharply. "You sure about that?" "I'm sure. Can you get me his contact information?" "I can, but Iris, be careful. That man has been waiting a long time for this moment. He's not going to be reasonable." "I know, but I need to try." Ruth pulled out her phone, scrolled through contacts. "I've got his office number. He's a lawyer in Burlington, about 2 hours from here." She wrote the number on a piece of paper, handed it to me. "Whatever you're planning, you don't have to face him alone. I can be there. Silas can be there." "Thank you. But this is something I need to do myself." I called the number from the workshop the next morning. A receptionist answered. "Pierce and Associates, how may I direct your call?" "I need to speak with Raymond Pierce. My name is Iris Callahan." There was a brief pause. "One moment, please." Less than 10 seconds later, a man's voice came on the line. Smooth, professional, with an edge underneath. "Miss Callahan, I've been expecting your call." "I'm sure you have." "I understand you've inherited property in Millbrook. I'd like to make you an offer. I'd like to meet with you in person to discuss the property and some other matters." Another pause. I can be there this afternoon. Shall we say 2 o'clock? 2 o'clock is fine. I'll see you then. He hung up. I spent the morning preparing. I gathered the 7 boxes from the underground room, brought them up into the workshop, arranged them on the long workbench in order.
Eleanor, William, Joseph, Samuel, David, Grace, Thomas. Then I waited. At exactly 2 o'clock, a black Lexus pulled up outside the workshop. Raymond Pierce stepped out. He was 62 but looked younger. Well dressed in a charcoal suit, silver hair perfectly styled. The kind of man who commanded a room. He walked toward the workshop with the confidence of someone who'd already won. I met him at the door.
Miss Callahan, he said, extending a hand. Raymond Pierce, thank you for agreeing to meet. I shook his hand. His grip was firm, calculated. Please, come in. He followed me into the workshop. His eyes swept the space, taking in the tools, the machines, the dust of years. Your grandfather's sanctuary, he said. I've been trying to see inside this building for 40 years. I know. He turned to face me. Then you also know why I want this property. Tell me anyway. This land should have been part of my father's estate. When he and Thomas Callahan opened their business in 1975, they were equal partners, 50-50. When my father died, his share should have gone to his family. But Thomas Callahan manipulated the situation, used my father's death to claim full ownership, left my family with nothing. Is that what you believe happened? That's what I know happened. I gestured to the workbench, to the 7 boxes. Then you don't know the whole story. Raymond looked at the boxes. His expression shifted slightly, curiosity replacing certainty. What are those? The truth about what really happened in 1982, about what your father did, about what my grandfather did. I want you to look at 6 of these boxes, and then I want you to make a choice. Raymond stepped closer to the bench. Read the names on the boxes. His face went pale when he saw his father's name. Where did these come from? My grandfather made them, left them for me. Each one contains evidence about the past 44 years. I opened William's box first, showed him the gambling debts, the receipts showing Thomas had paid every one. Raymond's hands trembled as he shuffled through the papers. My father owed $47,000, he said quietly. I knew about the debts, but I always thought Thomas had driven him to desperation by accusing him of theft. Your father was stealing from the business to pay these debts. My grandfather discovered it, confronted him. I moved to the next box. Joseph Hartwell, showed him the scholarship documents. My grandfather spent $120,000 to send Joseph Hartwell to MIT. Joseph was the son of one of the men your father owed money to. A man who died because of those debts. Raymond was silent. I opened the boxes for Samuel, David, and Grace one by one, showed him the evidence of more than $500,000 spent over 30 years. Your siblings got full scholarships to college, medical care, housing assistance, all of it paid by my grandfather, anonymously. While he and my grandmother sold everything they owned and lived in poverty. Raymond sank into a chair, his perfect composure cracking. Samuel's education, he whispered. David's practice, Grace's daughter's surgery, all of it. All of it paid for by the man you spent your life hating. He looked up at me. Why? Why would he do that? Because he loved your father. Because he couldn't save him. But he could save you. Raymond's eyes were wet. I threatened you when you were 7 years old. I told Thomas I would make sure you paid for what he'd done to my family. I know. That's why he put you in state care, to protect you from me. Yes. He stood abruptly, paced to the window, stood with his back to me. When he spoke again, his voice was thick. I've spent 44 years of my life hating a man who sacrificed everything for my family. Yes. And I drove him to give up his granddaughter, the only family he had left. Yes. How can I possibly? There's one more box, I said quietly. He turned. I pointed to the box marked Thomas Callahan. Inside that box is evidence that would clear my grandfather's name completely. Would prove that your father came to this workshop in 1982 with a gun. That he tried to kill my grandfather. That it was self-defense. Raymond went very still. But if I show you that evidence, you and your siblings will have to live with knowing what your father really was, what he really did. My grandfather carried this secret for 44 years to protect you from that knowledge. Now I'm giving you a choice, the same choice he faced. Do you want the truth, or do you want mercy? Raymond looked at the box, at his father's name carved into the wood. For a long time he didn't move. Then he said, "What do you want, Iris? I want you to leave this property alone. Stop trying to buy it. Stop trying to claim it. And in return, I'll never open that box. Your father's memory stays intact. You and your siblings can keep believing he was a good man who made mistakes. But you have to let it go, all of it. The hate, the vendetta, the idea that my grandfather owed you something. He didn't owe you anything. He gave you everything." Raymond walked slowly to the bench, placed his hand on his father's box. "Can I ask you something?" "Yes." Do you know what's in the last box?" "I do." "And you've chosen not to use it." "I've chosen to do what my grandfather would have wanted." Raymond nodded slowly. Then he did something I didn't expect. He opened his briefcase, pulled out a document. "This is a quitclaim deed. I was going to make you an offer today. $95,000 for the property. I had the papers drawn up. He took out a lighter, set the deed on fire, dropped it into a metal trash can, and watched it burn. I won't contest your inheritance. The property is yours, legally and morally. Thank you, but I have a request. What? May I come here once a year on the anniversary of my father's death to see these boxes? I thought about it. Yes, but only boxes 1 through 6. The 7th stays closed. Understood? He stood there for another moment, looking at the boxes, at the evidence of his wasted hate. Then he said, I'm sorry for what I did to you, for what I did to Thomas. I'm sorry. Tell him not me. He's dead. Then tell him anyway. Raymond left without another word. I watched his car disappear down Ridge Road. Then I went to the 7th box, picked it up, carried it back down to the underground room, and placed it back on the shelf where it belonged. Some truths aren't meant to be told. Some lies are acts of love. And some boxes should stay closed. 6 months can change everything. In October, when the maples turned red and gold, and the air in Millbrook carried the first bite of winter, I stood in front of a classroom of 8 people and introduced myself as a teacher for the first time in my life. My name is Iris Callahan, I said, and I'm going to teach you how to build something that lasts. The journey from that afternoon with Raymond Pierce to this moment had been neither straight nor simple. After Raymond left, I'd spent 3 days alone in the workshop, sitting among my grandfather's tools, trying to figure out what came next. I had a property I couldn't afford to maintain, a house that needed repairs, a workshop full of equipment I barely knew how to use, and exactly $43 to my name. The smart move would have been to sell. Take whatever money I could get and start fresh somewhere else. Somewhere without ghosts and complicated legacies. But every time I considered it, I thought about the letter my grandfather had written. You have my hands, Iris. I looked at my hands, scarred from dishwashing, calloused in all the wrong places. Hands that had never built anything more complicated than a cardboard box fort when I was 6. But they were his hands, the same proportions, the same long fingers, the same tendency to grip things too tightly when I was nervous. Maybe he'd been right. Maybe I did have the touch for this work. On the 4th day, Silas Hartwell came back. I was in the workshop attempting to clean one of the workbenches and mostly just pushing dust from one place to another when I heard his truck pull up. He came in carrying 2 cups of coffee from Ruth's store and a paper bag that smelled like fresh donuts. Figured you might be hungry, he said. Ruth says you haven't been down to the store in 3 days. I've been thinking. Dangerous activity. He set the coffee and donuts on the one clean corner of the bench. Come up with any conclusions. I want to stay. I want to learn to do what my grandfather did. But I don't know where to start. Silas took a sip of his coffee. Start at the beginning. That's what Thomas always said. You want to learn woodworking? You start with the basics. How to hold a chisel. How to read wood grain. how to measure twice and cut once. Will you teach me? I'm not as good as your grandfather was, not even close. But you're better than me. He smiled. That's a low bar. But yeah, I'll teach you what I know. I can't pay you. Not until I figure out how to make money with this place. Thomas paid me in advance. Remember, I figure I owe him about 2 years of teaching. Might as well use it on you. And so my education began. Every morning at 7, Silas would arrive with coffee. We'd spend the next 8 hours in the workshop while he taught me the fundamentals. The first week was humbling. I learned that holding a chisel properly required a specific grip, a specific angle, a specific amount of pressure. That I'd been doing it wrong every single time I'd tried. I learned that different woods had different personalities. Oak was stubborn, cherry was temperamental, walnut was forgiving. You had to approach each one differently with respect. I learned that a saw cut in the wrong direction could ruin a piece of wood that had taken 50 years to grow. I made mistakes. So many mistakes. I cut a board 3 inches too short because I measured from the wrong end. I split a beautiful piece of maple by driving a chisel against the grain. I sanded a tabletop so unevenly it wobbled like a ship in a storm. There were days I wanted to throw the tools across the room and walk away. On those days, Silas would say the same thing my grandfather used to say, according to Ruth. Mistakes are just wood's way of teaching you to pay attention. By the end of the first month, I could make a simple box. Nothing fancy, just 4 sides, a bottom, and a lid. But the joints were tight. The corners were square. The lid fit properly. It was mine. I had made it. I'd never felt prouder of anything in my life. But pride doesn't pay property taxes. In November, I got a letter from the county. The property taxes were 8 months overdue. Total amount owed $4,300. Payment required within 30 days, or the property would go to auction. I read the letter 3 times, my stomach sinking further each time. $4,000 might as well have been $4 million. I had no job, no income, no way to earn that kind of money in 30 days. I showed the letter to Silas the next morning. He read it, frowned, and set it down on the workbench. We need to talk to Constance Blackwell. She's the lawyer who handled your grandfather's estate. She'll know what options you have. Constance Blackwell's office was in Rutland, in a brick building on Main Street that had probably been there since Vermont was still a colony. Her office was on the 2nd floor, small but tidy. Books lining every wall. A desk covered in neat stacks of papers. Constance herself was in her late 40s with sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and the no-nonsense demeanor of someone who'd spent years dealing with people's problems. "Miss Callahan," she said, shaking my hand. "I'm glad you finally came to see me. I was beginning to wonder if you'd received my letters." "I received them. I've been dealing with other things." "I can imagine." She gestured to a chair. "Please sit. Tell me what brings you in." I handed her the tax letter. She read it and sighed. "I was afraid of this. Your grandfather had been deferring the taxes for years under a hardship provision. When he passed, that provision expired. Everything came due at once. I don't have $4,000. I assumed as much. She pulled out a file from her desk drawer. Let's talk about your options. First option, you can apply for a payment plan with the county. They might give you 6 months to pay, maybe a year if you're lucky. But you'd need to show proof of income, a job, some way to make regular payments. I don't have a job. Second option, you can take out a loan against the property. Use that money to pay the taxes. But you'd need a steady income to make the loan payments, so we're back to the job problem. Third option, sell. There are still people interested in the property. Raymond Pierce, for one, though I understand there's history there. He's not interested anymore. Constance's eyebrows rose. Really? That's surprising. He's been trying to acquire that land for decades. We came to an understanding. I see. She leaned back in her chair. Then we're looking at other buyers. I could probably get you 60, maybe 70,000. Enough to pay the taxes, pay off any other debts, and have a good chunk left over to start fresh somewhere else. I don't want to sell. Then you need income. Fast. I looked down at my hands. Carpenter's hands now, finally. Calloused in the right places. Scarred from learning. What if I could make something people want to buy, furniture or boxes or something? Constance considered this. The market for handmade woodwork is competitive, and it takes time to build a reputation. Time you don't have. What if it wasn't just me? What if it was a school? The idea had come out of nowhere. Or maybe it had been building in the back of my mind for weeks and only now found words. Constance leaned forward. A school, a woodworking school, for kids aging out of the foster system, like me. Teach them a trade, give them a place to live while they learn. Help them build something they can take with them into the world. That's ambitious. My grandfather spent his life helping people who had no one else. Maybe I can do the same thing, just more openly. Constance was quiet for a moment, studying me. Then she said, "If you're serious about this, we'd need to set up a nonprofit, apply for grants, find funding. It's a lot of work, and there's no guarantee it would generate money fast enough to save the property. But it's possible. It's possible, if you're willing to fight for it." I thought about my grandfather, about 44 years of quiet fighting, of choosing the hard right over the easy wrong. I'm willing. Constance pulled out a legal pad and started writing. Then let's get to work. Over the next 2 weeks, Constance and I built the framework for what would become the Callahan Legacy Workshop. The mission was simple: provide free woodworking education and temporary housing for young adults aging out of the foster care system. The logic was equally simple. These were kids who had no safety net, no family to fall back on, no generational wealth or connections. Teaching them a skilled trade gave them options. a path forward that didn't depend on luck or charity. Constance helped me file the paperwork for nonprofit status, helped me draft a mission statement and bylaws, helped me understand the labyrinth of regulations around housing minors and young adults. We worked out of her office sometimes until midnight, surrounded by half-empty coffee cups and legal documents. "You know," she said one night, rubbing her tired eyes, "most people your age are thinking about college or entry-level jobs. You're building an institution. I don't know what else to do. This property is all I have. I can't let it go." It's more than that, though, isn't it? This is about your grandfather, about finishing something he started. She was right, of course. But it was also about me, about all the kids like me who'd spent their childhoods in group homes and foster placements, waiting for someone to believe in them. My grandfather had believed in me, had set all of this in motion because he thought I was worth saving. Maybe I could do that for someone else. By the end of November, we had our nonprofit status approved. The Callahan Legacy Workshop was officially a 501c3 charitable organization. Now we just needed money. Constance started applying for grants, small local foundations, state programs for vocational education, federal funding for at-risk youth. "Most of these won't pay out for months," she warned. "Grant money moves slowly. We need something faster." "What about a fundraiser? In Millbrook, the whole town has maybe 400 people. Then we go bigger. Rutland, Burlington. We tell the story, my grandfather's story, what this place represents." Constance looked skeptical. "That's a lot of work for uncertain results." "Do you have a better idea?" She didn't. So we organized a fundraiser. Constance reached out to local media, got a reporter from the Rutland Herald to come interview me. The story ran on a Sunday in early December. Local woman transforms inherited workshop into school for foster youth. The article told a simplified version of my grandfather's story. His secret generosity, his sacrifice, his legacy. It mentioned the property taxes, the deadline, the vision for the school. And it included information about a fundraising event we were holding at the Millbrook Community Church on December 15th. I didn't expect much. Maybe a few curious locals. Maybe enough donations to buy us another month or two. What happened instead shocked me. On the evening of December 15th, more than 200 people showed up. They came from Rutland and Burlington and towns I'd never heard of. They filled the small church until people were standing in the aisles and crowding the doorway. Ruth Harper had organized the event with ruthless efficiency. Tables set up with information about the workshop, a donation box prominently displayed, coffee and cookies donated by local businesses. And she'd convinced me to speak. I stood at the front of the church, looking out at all those faces, and felt my carefully prepared speech evaporate from my mind. So I told them the truth instead. I told them about the cardboard box, about the deed hidden in a Bible, about finding the workshop and the 7 boxes. I told them about my grandfather's 44 years of secret kindness, I told them about Eleanor's letter, about William Pierce's debts, about 3 children who grew up believing their father was a good man because my grandfather had chosen mercy over truth. I told them about the 10 years I'd spent in the foster system, believing I'd been abandoned. And I told them about the choice I was trying to make now, to turn that abandonment, that pain, into something that could help other kids like me. When I finished, the room was silent. Then an older woman in the front row stood up. She was maybe 70, with white hair and a cane. "I'm Grace Pierce," she said. "William Pierce was my father." The room got even quieter. "I didn't know," Grace continued, her voice shaking slightly. "I didn't know what Thomas Callahan had done for us until my brother Raymond told me last month. He came to me with proof, showed me the scholarship documents, the medical bills he'd paid, everything." She looked directly at me. "My daughter nearly died when she was born. She needed heart surgery that cost over $200,000. The hospital told us there was an anonymous donor who'd covered the entire cost. We never knew who. It was your grandfather. My daughter is alive today because of Thomas Callahan, and I spent 40 years thinking he was the man who drove my father to suicide. I can never repay that debt, but I can help you finish what he started." She pulled out a checkbook, wrote out a check, walked up and handed it to me. I looked down at it. $25,000. "Grace," I whispered, "I can't accept this." "You can and you will. It's not charity. It's finally paying back what was given to us." After that, others came forward. A man in his 60s introduced himself as Samuel Pierce Grace's brother, the doctor. He wrote a check for $30,000. A woman in her 50s, David Pierce's wife, gave $15,000 in her husband's name. "David's in D.C. for work," she said, "but he wanted to contribute. He's been doing civil rights law for 30 years because someone gave him the chance. Now it's his turn to give someone else a chance." Then others started coming up, people I didn't know, people who'd read the article or heard about the fundraiser. A retired teacher gave $500 because someone should have done this for the kids I taught who had nowhere to go. A local contractor gave $1,000 and promised to help with any repairs the buildings needed. Ruth Harper came up with an envelope. Inside was $3,000. "From the people of Millbrook," she said. "We should have appreciated Thomas while he had him. This is us saying we're sorry." By the end of the night, we'd raised $87,000, more than enough to pay the taxes, enough to start renovating the house for student housing, enough to buy materials and tools, enough to actually do this. I stood in the empty church afterward, looking at the donation box overflowing with checks and cash, and cried for the 3rd time since coming to Millbrook. But this time, they weren't tears of grief. They were tears of possibility. The next 3 months were a blur of activity. Constance helped me set up a bank account for the nonprofit. We paid the property taxes with room to spare, applied for additional grants with our fundraising success as proof of community support. Silas brought in his contractor friends. They repaired the house's sagging porch, fixed the leaking roof, updated the electrical system to code, turned the 4 upstairs bedrooms into simple but livable spaces for students. Ruth organized a furniture drive. People donated beds, desks, chairs, lamps, everything a student would need. I spent January and February learning everything I could from Silas. Not just woodworking techniques, but how to teach. How to break down complex processes into steps. How to be patient with beginners. "You're a better student than teacher right now," Silas said one day in late February. "But you're learning. That's what matters." We put out our first call for students in March. The criteria were specific ages 16 to 24 currently in or recently aged out of the foster care system, willing to commit to 6 months of intensive training. We could accept 8 students for our first cohort. We got 43 applications. Reading through them broke my heart over and over. Kids who'd bounced between 15 different placements. Kids who'd been abandoned or abused or neglected. Kids who'd never had anyone believe in them. Kids like me. Choosing 8 was impossible. But Constance and Silas and I sat around Ruth's kitchen table for an entire weekend reading applications and made our selections. We looked for kids who showed determination, who had overcome something, who seemed ready to work hard if given the chance. In the end, our first 8 students were Lily Brennan, 17, who'd been in the system since she was 4 and had aged out with nowhere to go. Marcus Chen, 19, who'd spent his childhood in group homes and wanted to learn carpentry. Deshaun Williams, 18, whose father was in prison and whose mother had died of an overdose. Sophie Martinez, 20, who'd run away from an abusive foster home at 16 and spent 3 years homeless. Connor O'Brien, 17, who had a learning disability and had been told he'd never amount to anything. Aisha Jackson, 19, who'd aged out 2 years ago and had been working minimum wage jobs ever since. Tyler Brooks, 18, who'd been in 23 different placements and didn't believe anyone would actually help him. And James Hartwell, 16, Silas's second cousin, who'd just lost his mother and had nowhere else to go. They arrived on the first Monday in April. I stood on the porch of the house and watched them get off Ruth's van carrying garbage bags and backpacks containing everything they owned. They looked scared, suspicious, like they'd been promised things before and learned not to believe in promises. I knew that look. I'd seen it in the mirror for 10 years. "Welcome," I said. "Welcome to Callahan Legacy Workshop. For the next 6 months, this is your home. These people are your family. And this work is going to be hard. But I promise you, if you stick with it, you'll leave here with a skill that no one can take away from you." Lily, the 17-year-old, spoke up. "What if we're not good at it? What if we can't learn?" "Then we'll teach you until you can. That's what this place is for." Over the first week, we established routines. Wake up at 6:30, breakfast together in the house kitchen, in the workshop by 7. Mornings were classroom instruction. Silas and I teaching the fundamentals. How to identify different types of wood. How to read a measuring tape. How to use basic hand tools safely. Afternoons were hands-on practice. Each student got a workbench and a basic set of tools. They started with simple projects, cutting boards, small boxes, birdhouses. Evenings were for homework and free time, dinner together. Then they could work on personal projects or just rest. The first 2 weeks were rough. Connor struggled with measurements because numbers didn't make sense to him the way they did to others. We worked with him one-on-one until he developed his own system using color codes instead of numbers. Tyler kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. Kept expecting us to kick him out for some minor infraction. It took 3 weeks before he started to believe this wasn't a trick. Sophie had nightmares. I'd hear her crying in the night sometimes. We got her connected with a counselor in Rutland who specialized in trauma. But slowly they began to settle in. Marcus discovered he had an eye for joinery. His dovetails were cleaner than mine after just a month. Lily found she loved carving. She'd spend hours working on decorative details, completely absorbed. Deshaun turned out to be a natural teacher. He'd help the others when they struggled explaining things in ways that made sense to them. Aisha was methodical and precise. Everything she made was perfectly measured, perfectly executed. By the end of May, they weren't just students anymore. They were a community. I'd find them in the workshop after dinner, working on projects together, helping each other, teaching each other. They'd cook meals together, play cards in the evenings, argue about music and movies and everything else young people argue about. They were becoming family. In June, Raymond Pierce came to visit. It was June 14th, the day before my 19th birthday. 1 year and 1 day since I'd sat in Henry Morrison's office and received a cardboard box. Raymond arrived in the morning dressed casually for once, jeans and a button-down shirt instead of his usual suit. I met him in the workshop. The students were in the middle of a project working together to build a large dining table for the house. "Iris," Raymond said, "thank you for agreeing to see me." "It's the anniversary. You said you wanted to visit the boxes once a year." "I do, but I also wanted to see what you've built here." I showed him around, introduced him to the students, explained the program. He watched Lily carving an intricate pattern into a chair back. Watched Marcus fitting together joints for the table legs. Watched all 8 of them working with focus and pride. "Your grandfather would be proud," Raymond said quietly. "I hope so. I know so. This is what he always wanted, to give people a chance." We went down to the underground room together. I opened the trapdoor, and we descended the stairs. The 7 boxes sat on their shelves exactly as I'd left them 6 months ago. Raymond stood in front of his father's box for a long time. "I've been thinking," he said, "about what's in box 7, about the truth you're keeping hidden. Don't ask me to open it. I'm not going to." He turned to face me. "I'm going to thank you for keeping it closed." You know what your father did, don't you? You figured it out. I've suspected for a long time, since I was a teenager, really. My father was a gambler, a bad one, and when he died, all his debts mysteriously disappeared. Someone paid them. Someone staged his death to look like suicide. For years, I convinced myself it was Thomas, that he'd killed my father and covered it up. But the math never worked. If Thomas had killed him to cover up the theft, why pay the debts? Why help us? The only explanation that made sense was self-defense. My father tried to kill Thomas, and Thomas chose to protect us anyway. Why didn't you just ask him before he died? Pride, anger, fear of the truth. Raymond touched the box with William's name on it. I wasted 44 years hating a man who saved my life. I don't get those years back. But I can make sure the time I have left counts for something. He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. This is a donation to the Callahan Legacy Workshop. It's the amount my siblings and I calculated your grandfather spent on us over the years, adjusted for inflation, plus interest. He handed me the envelope. I opened it. Inside was a check for $1.2 million. Raymond, I can't. You can. This isn't charity. This is us finally paying our debt. Use it to expand the program, help more kids, build something that lasts. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just keep doing what you're doing. He spent an hour in that underground room sitting with the boxes. When he came back up, his eyes were red, but his face was peaceful. I'll see you next year, he said. Same time. Same time. After he left, I sat in the workshop with the check in my hand, trying to process what had just happened. $1.2 million. We could expand the program, take on more students, build additional housing, create a permanent endowment. We could help dozens of kids, maybe hundreds over the years. I thought about my grandfather sitting in this same workshop, making the choice to spend every dollar he had helping people he'd never meet. Now I had the chance to do the same thing on a scale he'd never imagined. That evening, I called a meeting with Silas, Ruth, and Constance. We sat around the dining table in the house, the one the students had just finished building, and I told them about Raymond's donation. We need to think bigger, I said. We started with 8 students because that's all we could handle. But with this money, we could do more. A lot more. How much more are we talking? Constance asked. What if we could take 24 students, 3 cohorts of 8 staggered throughout the year? Silas whistled low. That's ambitious. We'd need more instructors, more space. We build it. We have the land, 40 acres. We use some of it to build additional workshop space, more housing. Ruth smiled. You're thinking like your grandfather now, thinking about what's possible instead of what's practical. Is it crazy? Probably, Constance said, but the best things usually are. Over the summer, we made plans. We hired an architect to design an expansion. 2 additional buildings. One would be a larger workshop with space for 24 students to work simultaneously. The other would be housing with 12 bedrooms and common areas. We broke ground in August. The first cohort of students worked alongside the construction crew, learning as they helped build their own future. By September, when our first 8 students completed their 6-month program, the expansion was halfway done. We held a graduation ceremony in the original workshop. Each student presented a piece they'd made, their masterwork, the thing that represented everything they'd learned. Lily had carved a jewelry box with intricate floral patterns on every surface. Marcus had built a rocking chair with joinery so tight you couldn't slip a piece of paper between the joints. Deshawn had made a chess set, each piece hand-carved and sanded to silk. Sophie had crafted a hope chest with hidden compartments and a lock mechanism she'd designed herself. Connor had built a bookshelf using his color coding system with each shelf a different shade in a rainbow gradient. Aisha had made a writing desk with dozens of small drawers, each one fitting perfectly. Tyler had created a toolbox sturdy and simple and beautiful. James had carved a memorial piece for his mother with her name and dates, surrounded by images of things she'd loved. Each piece was perfect in its own way, and each one represented a kid who'd come here believing they couldn't do anything, proving themselves wrong. After the ceremony, I gave each of them the same thing my grandfather had given to others: a letter of recommendation, a toolkit of essential tools, and a check for $5,000. "This isn't payment," I told them. "It's investment. Invested in your next step. An apartment, more training, starting your own business, whatever you need." Lily hugged me so hard I couldn't breathe. "Thank you for everything." "You did the work. I just gave you the space to do it." That's what we needed, though. The space. Someone believing we could. All 8 of them found jobs within 2 weeks. Marcus got hired by a furniture maker in Burlington. Lily started an Etsy shop selling her carved boxes and had more orders than she could handle within a month. Deshawn got accepted into a college carpentry program with a full scholarship. Sophie opened a woodworking studio for women. Connor started teaching woodworking to other kids with learning disabilities. Aisha got hired by a restoration company working on historic buildings. Tyler and James decided to start a business together, building custom furniture. They stayed in touch, sent photos of their work, called when they had questions, or just wanted to talk. They'd become what my grandfather had always wanted for the people he helped. Not grateful dependents, but independent craftspeople with skills and confidence and futures. Our second cohort started in October. By then, the new workshop was complete. We had room for all 16 students, 8 from the spring and 8 new ones. Silas hired 2 additional instructors. A woman named Patricia, who specialized in fine woodworking, and a man named Marcus, who'd learned his craft in prison and wanted to help kids avoid the mistakes he'd made. We settled into a rhythm. Every 6 months, a new cohort would start. Every 6 months, a cohort would graduate. The cycles of learning and growth and transformation. By the following spring, we'd helped 32 students. 32 kids who'd come with nothing and left with skills and tools and hope. The local paper did a feature story, then a regional magazine, then a national news outlet. Suddenly, we had a waiting list of over 300 kids, and we had enough funding from grants and donations to keep growing. On March 14th, 2028, 2 years after I'd first arrived in Millbrook, I stood in my grandfather's original workshop. It was late evening. The students had all gone back to the house for dinner. I was alone with the tools and the dust motes floating in the last light of day. I walked to the back of the workshop, opened the trap door, descended into the underground room. The 7 boxes sat on their shelves undisturbed. I'd been down here many times over the past 2 years, sometimes with Raymond on his annual visit, sometimes with Silas when we needed to verify details for the program's mission statement, sometimes alone when I needed to remember why I was doing this. Today was different. Today I brought something with me. I pulled it from my bag. A wooden box, 12 inches long, 8 inches wide, 6 inches deep. It had taken me 4 months to make, working in the evenings after the students left, learning and relearning techniques until I got them right. The wood was cherry like my grandfather had used. The joints were hand-cut dovetails. The lid fit perfectly with a small brass latch, and carved into the top in letters I'd practiced for weeks to get right was a name. Henry Morrison. I opened the box. Inside, I'd placed 3 things: a letter, a photograph of me and my 8 first students on graduation day, and a check for $5,000. The letter said, "Dear Henry, you probably don't remember me. You had hundreds of kids come through your office over the years. I was just file number 2016-3847. But you gave me a cardboard box on my 18th birthday. And in that box was a question mark that changed my life. I wanted you to know what happened after I left your office. I found my grandfather's workshop. I learned his story. I discovered that abandonment was actually protection, and that love sometimes looks like letting go. I'm writing to you from that workshop now. It's not just mine anymore. It belongs to all the kids who come through here learning to build things that last. This box is my way of saying thank you. Thank you for being kind when you didn't have to be. Thank you for keeping the promise you made to my grandfather. Thank you for caring about a kid who probably seemed like just another file. The photograph shows some of the students you helped save, even if you didn't know it. They're all doing well, building lives, building futures. The money is so you can help someone else, or take a vacation, or just know that the work you did mattered. It mattered to me. With gratitude, Iris Callahan. I closed the box, set it on a shelf beside the others. 8 boxes now. 7 for the past, 1 for the future. I sat on the floor of that underground room for a while, thinking about patterns and cycles and legacies. My grandfather had spent his life making boxes full of secrets and sacrifices. I was spending mine making boxes full of gratitude and hope. Different contents, same language. The language of wood and time and careful hands. The language of love. When I climbed back up to the workshop, the sun had set completely. The space was dark except for the moonlight coming through the high windows. I didn't turn on the lights, just stood there in the darkness, feeling the presence of all the work that had been done here. The furniture my grandfather had built, the lessons Silas had taught, the mistakes I'd made and the things I'd learned, the 32 students who'd transformed themselves in this space, all of it layered like growth rings in wood, each layer telling a story, each one building on the one before. I heard a sound behind me, turned to see Lily standing in the doorway. "Lily, what are you doing here? I thought you went back to Burlington." "I did, but I came back. I wanted to talk to you about something." "Okay." She came into the workshop. Even in the darkness, I could see she was nervous. "I've been thinking," she said, "about what comes next for me. I've got my Etsy shop, and it's doing well, but I want to do more." "What do you mean?" "I want to teach, like you do. I want to help other kids learn this." "Lily, that's wonderful. But you're only 19. You should explore, travel, figure out who you are." "I know who I am. I'm someone who got a chance, and I want to give that chance to other people." "What are you asking?" "I'm asking if I can come back, as an instructor. I know I'm young and I'm still learning, but I could help with the beginners, the ones who are scared and don't think they can do it, because I was them 2 years ago." I looked at her, saw the determination in her eyes, the certainty. She reminded me of myself. "Okay," I said. "Yes, we can always use another teacher." Lily grinned. "Really? Really? When can you start? Is tomorrow too soon?" I laughed. "Tomorrow's perfect." She hugged me again, just like she had at graduation. Then she left, practically bouncing with excitement. I stood alone in the workshop again. But it didn't feel lonely. It felt full. Full of possibility. Full of the future unfolding exactly as it should. I walked outside. The April air was cool and clean. Above me, the Vermont sky was dense with stars. I thought about my grandfather standing in this same spot 60 years ago with his best friend, opening a business called Callahan and Pierce Woodworks, thinking they were building something that would last. They had been right, just not in the way they'd expected. What lasted wasn't the business or the partnership or even the buildings. What lasted was the choice to care, to sacrifice, to pour yourself into making other people's lives better. That was the real legacy. Not the workshop or the tools or the property. but the invisible architecture of kindness that held people up when they had nothing else. My grandfather had built that architecture in secret, one person at a time, one sacrifice at a time. I was building it differently, openly, with help, with community. But the foundation was the same. Love translated into action. Hope translated into skill. Belief translated into opportunity. I looked back at the workshop, my workshop now. Tomorrow, 16 students would arrive for the day's lessons. Lily would join the teaching staff. We'd work on a new project building beds for the expansion housing. And in 6 months, we'd graduate another cohort. And in 6 months after that, another. Year after year, student after student, each one carrying forward the legacy my grandfather had started. Not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Because they'd learned what I'd learned in this place. That the best things we build aren't made of wood at all. They're made of the choices we make, the hands we extend, the doors we hold open for people coming behind us. I went back into the workshop one more time, found the box I'd made for Henry Morrison, carried it to my truck. Tomorrow, I'd mail it to him at the Department of Social Services in Portland, Oregon. Tonight, I'd sleep in my grandfather's house in the town that had become my home, surrounded by the quiet evidence of work that mattered. And in the morning, I'd wake up and teach 8 young people how to hold a chisel properly, how to read the grain, how to measure twice and cut once, how to build something that lasts, not just furniture, but lives, not just boxes, but futures. That was the real craftsmanship, the kind my grandfather had mastered, the kind I was finally learning, the kind I'd spend the rest of my life teaching, one student at a time, one careful cut at a time, one act of belief at a time, building something that would outlast us all.